Hey everyone, Ben here, and it's that time of year when the annual official Formula 1 game comes out, and against my better judgment, I buy it. If you've watched my channel for long, you'll know I'm primarily a sim racer who spends his time in iRacing, Automobilista 2 and Race Room. But fundamentally, I love racing games, and I got into sim racing in the first place via the official F1 series. So here we go again with more promises of revised and improved handling, physics models, and some relatively pointless new game modes too. What does it all amount to? First things first, if you play the Formula 1 games for their career modes, they're still here, they're still excellent, but they're essentially identical to last year. They remain the best and most authentic career experiences in all of modern racing games, featuring dynamic progression and a range of RPG-style elements, but EA seemingly hasn't invested any time in them at all this year, a familiar story for FIFA fans. Instead, F1 Life has been massively expanded to F1 World, a new hub for traditional game modes like Time Trial and Grand Prix, and a FIFA Ultimate Team style mode of tech upgrades, XP growth, and daily and weekly tasks. And we have part 2 of the Breaking Point interactive story mode. Now these modes might be up your street as a video gamer or an F1 fan. I'm sure there'll be hours of entertainment in each, but ultimately for the purposes of this video, they've got very little to do with sim racing. Also, if you're sim racing on PC, there's some big quality of life features missing. Wheel and pedal calibration remains a fiddly mess, and menus have become even more convoluted and still don't have mouse support, so it's keyboard and controller inputs only. Very tedious. So, this doesn't sound great, right? Well, fortunately the most important elements of the title, the core handling and physics, have seen lots of attention. The question is, are they better, and is a sim racer likely to enjoy them? Well, my immediate impression is that the cars are quite significantly more predictable and straightforward to handle than last year. In F1 22, the cars were very temperamental in the lower gears when running no assists, and even real F1 drivers would comment that the cars were more difficult to drive than in real life. One area which was particularly maddening in F1 22 was how difficult it was to get the cars off the start line. As a sim racer, I like things to be authentically challenging, but often it just felt ridiculous. The sweet spot on the revs and clutch release often impossible to find, leading to big wheel spin and losing places off almost every start. Fast forward 12 months and it's a lot more forgiving. The window to get a decent start is much wider, and honestly it feels like a step in the right direction, with the added benefit that the AI now has more variable starts too, and the resulting racing action is much more interesting. More broadly, you'll still encounter understeer in the less well developed cars, and snap oversteer if you overdo it on throttle inputs. But the game is a bit better at telling you those things are going to happen through the force feedback and giving you the chance to save any spins or make corrections before you crash out. And cars handle curbs far better in F1 23, opening up the amount of track you can safely use to navigate corners without fear of binning it. This doesn't mean that it's an easy game. It's still challenging to go very quick consistently over many laps, and I don't run anything like full difficulty. But it's easier to push harder than it was in F1 22. The problem is that when married to quite basic force feedback, tyre and track modelling compared to other racing sims, the cars can feel a bit lifeless and uninspiring. Don't get me wrong, it all does its job quite well. I can quite happily drive extended sessions and get immersed in the game. It's just a bit too sanitised, and I don't get that much back through my wheel to really excite me. Maybe this is in part reflective of 2023's big, heavy, ground downforce cars, but I'm not sure this equals a more rewarding driving experience. It's one area where F1 23 continues to fall short on more sophisticated sims. On the flip side, one area where F1 23 excels is in its AI. I've always liked the series AI, but this year feels like another good step on. I can't speak to longer race strategy AI just yet, but in terms of wheel-to-wheel racing, it's often objectively great. Even though they're a little bit kind at letting you around the outside, the F1 23 AI is easily the match of other sim titles, and actually, it's a lot better than most that I've raced with. And when it comes to other sim features, there remains a lot to like. In the cockpit, you'll be managing tyre life and strategy, overtake mode, energy deployment, and have access to a bunch of live race information via a heads-up display or the engineer on the radio. Just as in the previous games, elements of car damage are a bit limited in terms of the chassis monocoque and rear wing, but you will encounter engine failures, gearbox faults, damage to the floor of the car, small to catastrophic aero damage, engine wear, punctures, and more. And so will the AI drivers, often causing yellow flags, safety cars, and new for this year, red flags too. Again, the truth is this puts F1 23 right up there with other sim racing games when it comes to authentic race events and damage. The extent to which these are canned or scripted effects is hard to judge, but when you're in the thick of the action, it all feels pretty good to me. Finally, there are expansions to ranked online multiplayer, but at the time of making the video, I haven't yet had the time to properly explore them. If they're any good, I'll cover it in future content. So where does that leave us? Is a sim racer likely to enjoy F1 23? Well, honestly, by this point, I think you already know the answer to that question. If your absolute priority is sophisticated handling and tyre models, F1 23 will likely leave you a bit cold, and there are other titles out there better for you. But no other title, even those with F1 content, can offer the total Formula 1 experience like F1 23 can, with all teams, tracks and visual trappings of the real thing. And while F1 23 won't replace iRacing, R-Factor 2 or ACC in your collection, it can complement them. Despite its headline feature editions being less than inspiring, ultimately the core racing is very enjoyable, thanks to revised handling and good AI behaviour. For me personally, I love racing games, and there's room in my library for more accessible simulations that focus more on immersion and experience than very technical titles that are all about replicating real life. I hope you found this video helpful. Let me know in the comments if you'd like to see more F1 23 on the channel, and I will see you on the next one.